Hi, welcome to our presentation, Effective Differentiation and Scaffolding Strategies for your NRS Standards Aligned Classroom. I'm Matilda Reckford, and this is Dr. Kate Moran, and we're both from the Center for Applied Linguistics. We like to start our professional development sessions with objectives. This way you can see what you should get out of this presentation, and we can reflect at the end of the session and assess whether we met these objectives. At the end of this webinar, participants will be able to describe how scaffolding is situated within social cultural perspective of learning and why it's effective. You'll be able to use the VIP framework to incorporate scaffolding into all segments of a lesson and understand the importance of reducing and removing scaffolds as students progress. And finally, practice differentiating a scaffold across modalities and NRS levels. So for our online attendees, we're going to put this link to this Mentimeter in the chat. And for you all here, you can join with scanning this QR code, and we'll actually also put the Menti page now. And so you'll both see the QR code and the use code at the top that you can also enter into the Menti website. So we have a series of 4 true or false questions to start kind of checking our knowledge on scaffolding. And so our first question here is, good scaffolding means matching the level of support to the learner's current needs and gradually reducing assistance as they develop independence. True or false? We're seeing on the screen. In fact, yes, this was true. Just like physical scaffolding in construction, educational scaffolds are temporary structures that provide the right amount of support at the right time and can be adjusted and removed as learners progress. Question 2, once a scaffold has been removed, students should not need that scaffolding again. True or false? Okay, I think we have about the same answers as before. So yes, this is false. Learning is not linear. Students may need different levels of support depending on the task, context, or circumstance. Reintroducing scaffolds when needed helps students achieve challenging tasks. Also, when students are familiar with the scaffold, they can use it more confidently. Advanced students do not benefit from scaffolding since they can already perform most tasks independently. True or false? So yes, this was also false. All learners benefit from appropriate scaffolding when encountering new or complex tasks. Advanced learners might need different types of scaffolds, but they still benefit from support when pushing beyond their current abilities. And our final true or false, different students working on the same task may need different types and amounts of scaffolding to be successful. Great, this was also true. Students come with varying backgrounds, skills, and learning needs. Providing appropriate scaffolding means considering these individual differences when designing support. We'll go back to our presentation. And I'll pass it to Dr. Kate Moran to introduce the National Reporting System.
Excuse me. Thank you, Matilda. And it's so nice to be here with so many experts in the room. Our little scaffolding quiz is not difficult for you, as you all could see. But I did want to excuse me, kind of frame our presentation by saying that at the Center for Applied Linguistics, we're working on building out some professional development courses that will be asynchronous for teachers of adult English learners. And this topic on scaffolding will be in our first course. So this is a little bit of a preview. So I'm a little nervous because we're kind of rolling it out with people who know what we're talking about. So very much will appreciate your feedback. We have a couple of activities to kind of show you how we've built in some interactive elements, and we're hoping that this course will be ready to go in about a month. We're wanting it to be part of a series of courses, so make sure you download the document we uploaded to this session. It's got some QR codes that have links to 2 webinars that we did previously, and also a little survey about the needs for adult English educators. And also just a way for us to keep in touch and let you know what's coming and when things are available. So all of our PD will also be aligned to the National Reporting System standards. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I don't know how many of you are in programs that are aligned to these standards or know about them. So just give you a little background just in case, okay? So the National Reporting System, or NRS, is the accountability framework that governs adult education programs that are funded under WIOA. And this ensures that programs track and report learner progress and use a standardized approach. One key performance indicator within NRS is measurable skill gain. This metric captures how well students advance within a program through test score improvements. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, the NRS levels stand for, as I said, National Reporting System. And these are the education functional levels. And within those education functional levels, there are additional levels for ESL, for English as a second language. And this is the accountability system for the federally funded adult education programs. The educational functioning level, ESL descriptors are intended to guide both teaching and assessment for adult learners of English. In other words, the education programs use these standards to monitor English learners' progress in their programs and for reporting purposes. So they address the most critical concepts for assessment and inform instructions for adult learners in the classroom. The current version of the NRS ESL descriptors were revised in 2017 so that they align with the English language proficiency standards of adult education that were released in 2016. And these also correspond to the college and career readiness standards for English language arts, literacy, and mathematical and science practices. The current version of the descriptors, as you can see on this slide, are divided into 6 levels, with the language abilities and skills increasing in demand from level 1 to 6. Each level describes the English language components for interpretive skills, productive skills, and interactive skills. So at the interpretive skill level, we're talking about the learner's ability to process, understand, interpret, or engage with level appropriate literary and informational written and spoken text to construct meaning. The productive skills refer to the learner's ability to produce level appropriate written and spoken text such that it meaningfully transmits meaning. And the interactive skills refer to the learner's ability to process and produce level appropriate written and spoken text interactively with the purpose of understanding, interpreting, engaging in, and transmitting meaning. So we will be using these descriptors to frame our presentation and the activities that we're talking about today. So just taking a closer look at these descriptors, we have them here in a kind of a matrix. So if we just take a moment to, and you might be familiar with these, but just to have a look here at these descriptors for level 1 and level 2. And as you're, as you're reading, I want you to notice what's different between level 1 and level 2. How are these skills increasing, and what language do you see in the descriptors that denotes the difference in skill level between 1 and 2? So I'll give you all a moment to look at those, and you are welcome. Don't be shy if you want to shout something out, or if anyone online wants to add something to the chat box. Oh, thank you. We'll show one to get you started. Then feel free to jump in with others. So for interpretive skills, you'll notice, and there are other differences too, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. But for level 1, we're looking at recognize the meaning of a few frequently occurring words. And for level 2, that comes up to some words. So we have just a few, and then we're moving to some. When we're looking at productive skills at level 1, we're looking at the ability to communicate simple information or feelings, and express a preference or opinion about a familiar topic. When we look at level 2, it's communicate information and feelings. It's that simple is taken out of level 2 descriptor, right? Express a preference in level 1 or opinion about a familiar topic. We have that in level 2, but we're now adding give a reason. So we're increasing the complexity there. So in some cases, we see the removal of something that might have made it a little simpler at level 1 versus level 2. And in some cases, it's adding things. Also recognize and use a small number of frequently occurring nouns and verbs to a narrow range of vocabulary in syntactically simple sentences. For interactive skills, we have familiar topics with limited involvement, participate in conversations, that is. Where with level 2, we see that that limited involvement is not there anymore. So for level 2, we have actively listen, participate in short conversations and written exchanges about familiar topics, and that limited involvement is not there. Also, gather information from a few provided sources. In level 2, it's just gather information from provided sources. We can look a little bit at level 3 versus 4. So here for level 3 in interpretive skills, we have retell a few key details using emerging strategies versus retell key details and answer questions about those details. We have identify the main argument and one supporting reason with support versus summarize part of a text and explain reasons supporting a claim. We have determine the meaning of frequently occurring words, phrases, and expressions, and now this becomes more academic. So we're looking at academic and content specific words. For productive skills, we have recount a short sequence of events in order. And then at the next level, level 4, we're now adding on with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it's still that sequencing, but we're moving up in level to really having that beginning, middle, and end. For, again, in the productive skills at level 3, we have begin to use some academic and content specific words. And at level 4, we have adapt language choices now for purpose or task in your audience. So we're now getting into that ability to discriminate between registers and audience and making word choices, not just that are academic or content specific, but also appropriate to the context that the learner is working within. For interactive skills, present information and ideas. Now we have build on other ideas and express your own ideas. We have added multiple sources down at that level 4, where we don't have a number of sources referenced at level 3. And then up at our high levels, analyze reasoning and evidence and persuasive texts, and up to level 6. Now we're analyze, evaluate reasoning in persuasive in persuasive text. I think I said that backwards. So we're adding that evaluate level, that next level of cognitive demand for our level 6 learners. For our productive skills at level 5, we have construct a claim with logically ordered reasons and conclusion. And at level 6, it's construct substantive claims and distinguish those from counterclaims. For interactive skills, we have synthesize information into organized reports. Now we are adding that analysis as well. So not just synthesizing, but also analyzing and integrating information. All right. Excuse me, I have to catch my speaker notes up to our slide here. There we go. So we're going to start talking about scaffolding by talking about how it came to be and where it's embedded, which is in the sociocultural perspective of learning. So scaffolding comes out of, as I just said, the sociocultural perspective of learning. And this emphasizes that learning is deeply connected to social interaction. Sociocultural theory was developed by Lev Vygotsky, so you might be familiar with Vygotsky. And it's focused on the role that social interaction plays in a child's cognitive development. But many aspects of sociocultural learning and the sociocultural perspective also apply to our adult learners. The idea of learning as a social process is particularly relevant when we're thinking about language learning, because it is an inherently social process with a social and communicative goal. When we think about our adult English learners, they're not learning by passively receiving information. They are actively building knowledge through their interactions with teachers, peers, and their environment. When students are working together, they are building knowledge collaboratively. Each student is bringing to our classrooms valuable resources that they bring to these interactions, and that helps them co-construct knowledge. They have linguistic knowledge of all of the languages that they speak and that they're bringing with them. They have life experiences, work experiences, cultural knowledge, and all of these funds of knowledge, all of these resources become tools for learning when students are sharing their experiences in the classroom. So as students are working collaboratively to solve problems and helping to explain concepts to each other, all of which they're drawing on the funds of knowledge they're bringing with them to our classrooms, this is also helping that co-construction of knowledge among our students. All right, so you might be familiar with ZPD, the zone of proximal development, because it is a key tenet of Vygotsky's theory of learning and development. But ZPD helps with understanding where learning happens most effectively. So if you can imagine 3 concentric circles like we have here on this slide, you can see that the inner circle represents what a learner can do on their own independently. So if we're thinking back to our matrix of our standards, Those standards are end of level standards. In case you didn't know that, that's what our students are working towards mastering. So if we're looking at what they can do independently, we're probably looking at the level before they're situated right now, right? And those are things that they should be able to do in that inner circle. That should be comfort zone for them. They can do it independently on their own. When we look, what's so great about these descriptors is when we look at those descriptors, it gives you a guide as to where we can work with our students to really get in that ZPD for that student. So for example, if we had a level 2 learner, which is the low beginning learner working on a productive task, this student might be expressing a preference about a familiar topic in English. So the outer circle represents what the learner cannot do yet, like deliver an short oral presentation on a familiar topic, because that's an end of level 3 standard in the productive task, in the productive domain, right? So that's the outer circle, what they can't do yet. We know what they can do. And that space between the two is their zone of proximal development. And this is where the student can succeed with appropriate support. And scaffolds are one way that we can help provide that support to our students. For our level 2 learner, this might mean using sentence frames and a word bank to express an opinion about a familiar topic and provide a reason for their opinion. They might not be able to support their opinion on their own, but when we add scaffolds like practiced sentence frames, ones we've explicitly taught and practiced with our students, maybe a list of topical vocabulary that we've brainstormed together as a class, maybe some modeling from the teacher on how to do this task, then the student can achieve this task. And of course, we're working toward independence, right? We want to get them to the point where this now moves into that inner bullseye circle and becomes part of their comfort zone. You'll know when you're not in the ZPD by the way the students are acting, right? Because if it's really anxiety producing, we're in the cannot do it yet. We don't want to be there. But if it's easy breezy and it's not much of a challenge, they're working in their comfort zone. And so then we do want to push a little bit with appropriate scaffolding to get them in that ZPD learning zone where they can achieve the most and continue to move forward. I'm going to talk about a framework for scaffolding called VIP. I don't know if you've heard of this before. I'm borrowing it from the SIOP model, which I don't know if anyone familiar with the SIOP model? Yeah. If you're not. The SIOP model is a framework for teachers of multilingual learners. It's usually used in K-12. But this acronym VIP is really useful, I think, for anyone teaching as we're thinking about different types of scaffolds and where they might fit in our lessons and lesson plan. So there we go. So for VIP, the V stands for verbal scaffolds or verbal scaffolding. The I is for instructional scaffolding, and the P refers to procedural scaffolding. And it's a useful way to help us remember how to include scaffolding in all parts of a lesson, and also to recognize things we may not have previously thought were scaffolds, so that we can be more intentional about using those supports to help our students get in their ZPD through all phases of a lesson. Okay, so I'm going to look a little more closely at each of these types, starting with our verbal scaffolding. So verbal scaffolding is provided by the teacher. And it really helps students stretch their oral production and comprehension. So you might already be providing verbal scaffolding to your students. You may not have realized that this was scaffolding, but understanding what verbal scaffolding is might help you be a little bit more intentional about providing the support. So verbal scaffolds can look like using gestures along with words for your level 1 students, or using pictures along with your words. It could be asking level 2 students to provide more information. Saying things like, what else do you know about that? Can you tell me more? Can you repeat that? Can you repeat what he said? Things like that, where you're really increasing that oral production of your students. You're encouraging them to elaborate on responses. All of those are verbal scaffolds that you can provide students. You can also have students provide this type of encouragement in small groups to each other. As you're teaching them, tell me more about that. They're encouraging each other to kind of elaborate on their responses. Another form of verbal scaffolding is a think aloud. Anyone familiar with doing think alouds? Great. Great. It's just so nice to have, an audience who's used to doing all these types of things. Yeah, so think alouds when you're encountering a new text or a new portion of a text, or even it can work with like posters or flyers. And you're just demonstrating and modeling for your students what you're thinking out loud as you're approaching this new text. It's a great way for showing your students exactly how to apply strategies that you've been teaching them. It models your thinking out loud, so really making explicit some of these things that go on in our head, that metacognitive awareness that's so important for students to develop. So think alouds are a great verbal scaffold for students at almost any level, because you can make them very highly supported, or you can increase the complexity as the texts you're introducing are more complex as well. Also, when you're embedding definitions, you'll be talking and then that is, and then you give a little definition, or it's like, and then you give a little definition. That type of embedding definitions is another form of verbal scaffolding that works well for those intermediate to advanced levels, where you're kind of introducing new vocabulary, but you're giving them a gloss of what that vocabulary means right embedded within your speech. So here are some examples of some suggestions for how you might use verbal scaffolds at different levels. Of course, all of these scaffolds could be used with students at any level, as long as that support is within their zone of proximal development. So we're helping them move toward something that they can't do yet. So for level 1, really focusing on gestures, recasts, you could do translation to and from the student's primary language, this think alouds, at higher levels, embedding definitions, encouraging elaboration. Same with higher levels, you might draw more awareness to pronunciation, you might encourage extended speech or embed definitions. I'm sure you can think of other verbal scaffolds you might include for learners at different levels. When we move on, we're going to talk about the gradual release of responsibility. So if we're looking at these types of verbal scaffolding, it often falls in that stage of I do, you watch. When you're teaching something new to your students, a lot of verbal scaffolds will come in that phase of procedural scaffolding, actually. So next we have the I, which is instructional scaffolds. And these can include the physical and digital tools that we're using to support learning. These scaffolds are really useful for productive and interpretive tasks, and they can be modified for learners at different levels. So we're going to discuss first some examples for productive tasks. So this is focusing more on speaking and writing. So we might often think of sentence frames as a support for speaking and writing. We can also extend those into paragraph frames, where we're giving scaffolded topic sentences and discourse organizers. So those words or phrases that help with transitions, things like furthermore, in addition, on the other hand. We can also provide discussion frames, so sentence starters for stating an opinion or adding on to someone's idea, agreeing or disagreeing. However, we're using this type of language framing. They need to be explicitly taught and practiced with our students so that they know how to use them. Also, the more we practice them, the more they become automatic. and then the less they even need them as a scaffold because they're remembering that framing, and they can just draw it up as they need it. Before they're at that stage where they have it really memorized, we also want to make sure we have them readily available. So not only have we practiced them, we've given them a chance to know when to use them. When the time comes for them to use them, we want to make sure that we have that resource available to them easily so they can grab it and use it to support their discussions or writing. There are also a huge number of digital graphic organizers, things like mind maps and story maps that we can use online. There are visual clustering tools that are kind of interactive where you can add node words and then branching words off of those. Bubble.us is a nice one if you've ever used that. Yeah. It's Bubble without the E, BUBBL.us. And they have some you could use for free. And then I think it is a subscription to do more extensive mapping, but it's kind of fun for students. And those types of tools can help them visualize the relationships between concepts, of course, and also improve their digital literacy skills. Graphic organizers, we all know about graphic organizers, right? But a well-designed graphic organizer that fits the purpose of the task, whether it's an oral presentation or it's writing, and what type of writing are they doing? Is it persuasive or narrative? Is it a critical response? Should change the way your graphic organizer looks. Sometimes you can just have the graphic organizer serve the function of the piece of writing. It really can be that support a graphic organizer is the final product. Obviously, word banks and word walls and vocabulary notebooks work really well in conjunction with graphic organizers. And then models. We have models of completed tasks on here. These are great instructional supports. I would encourage you to use student work. Take identifiers off, make sure you have their permission. But providing student work as models, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is how another student had previously completed this task. This is what that can look like. And offering several examples of student work that's, de-identified can be really encouraging to learners because then they see themselves in that model and they don't see you with a perfect example of something they may or may not be able to do yet. So providing models that are not perfect can often be a really encouraging support for students. Especially if you're providing those models with any kind of a rubric that you use for grading, so they can see where that piece kind of fell in the rubric and make their own decisions about where they want to, what their goal is for that task. For interpretive tasks, some instructional scaffolds we could use. And again, these are tasks that are focused more on reading and listening. Guides, reading and listening guides can be very helpful. You can provide a guide for either a video or something that students are listening to, a lecture, if you had a guest speaker, and know how they're going to organize their talk. A guide can be useful for that. You also can use reading guides for any kind of text that you're providing students. And within these guides, you can have a knowledge check before and after. You can have comprehension questions or matching. You can have questions that follow in order of the text. You can have them looking for maybe grammatical features that you're working on or something like that occur in the text, or transitional words maybe you're studying. And so all of those can, follow through this piece of writing or reading or something that they're listening to. You could also have students do them in groups or in pairs where one student answers, the even questions and another student answers the odd questions. And then they come together and discuss and share answers with each other. That helps, especially for listening, I find. because that really focused attention, they're really honed in on, they're listening to the whole thing, but they're really listening for the answers to their questions. And their partner is too. So then when they're coming together and sharing those answers, it helps for them to have focused attention on certain things and not have to be listening for all the details of everything in the first time they're listening, right? Also providing captions either in English for videos or in the student's home language if it's available. Using digital text with hyperlinked vocabulary or concepts, all of those are wonderful instructional supports for reading and listening as well. All right, and on to our P for VIP. This stands for procedural scaffolding. This one is kind of a whole, it encompasses a lot of our other scaffolds as well. Because now we're talking about the procedures for teaching, and you can set up your whole lesson plan to be a scaffold in and of itself, right? So the way that you structure each of the activities in your classroom can serve to scaffold from more guided to more independent as you move through either one lesson or through a unit. And that in itself is scaffolding, just arranging it in that way is scaffolding for our students. So the gradual release method might be familiar with. I do, you watch. I like the four, there's a 3 is the basic one. I like a 4-parter myself, which is I do, you watch, we do together, you do together, I watch and support, before moving on to you do independently. We're going to talk a little bit more about gradual release in a few minutes, but it's a great example of a procedural scaffold because each phase of that procedure serves as a scaffold, moving our learners toward independence. Intentional grouping is also a part of procedural scaffolding. So really thinking hard about why and how you're forming groups for activities. What purpose do you want? And how can you best leverage the abilities of your students to get to that purpose? So sometimes you might want to do high-low pairs to help scaffold and support for a lower learner and give a higher learner that opportunity to serve more as a teaching role. We don't want to do that all the time because it's taxing on our higher level learners, but it can be once in a while a nice support both for the lower level learner and giving that higher level learner to that chance to really clarify their own thinking as they're sort of supporting another student. We can also think about having students work together for an authentic task and then grouping them by their strengths. So when you know your students and what each one can contribute to a collective project-based assignment, for example, that intentional grouping in that way is also a procedural scaffold. At higher levels, peer review is wonderful. It can also work at lower levels. You just have to be really, really, really careful about what you're asking students to do and to review for each other. But at more advanced levels, if you train your peer review pairs well, so they know exactly what they're looking for, what types of feedback are expected. Students, you know, if you have a classroom where students have really good rapport with each other, then those peer review pairs can be another really useful procedural scaffold. So, you might think about now some procedural scaffolds that you're already using in the classroom, and a little bit more about how you can be even more intentional about providing scaffolding at each of those levels. So we're going to do a little activity now. We have a version of this sort online for our participants who are joining us on Zoom. And we're going to drop a link in the chat now for our folks online. And so this message is for the people participating virtually. The link is to a Google slide deck, and you will be prompted to make a copy of that slide deck. That is so that we don't have everybody working on the same slide deck. Keep the slide deck in edit mode. Don't put it in presentation mode so that you can move the cards around on the second or third slide. The second slide has some instructions for you. Then the third slide has some cards you can move around. And then if you scroll through the rest of the deck, you'll see that there's an additional scaffold in there. For those of you who are here in person, if you would kind of form a group of, I don't know how many people we have, but probably 3 or 4. We have some here. Did you want to, so I'm going to turn it over to Matilda to explain where all the materials are.
Yeah, so these materials are in these first 2 rows, and then right here is this the sort that you can see on the slide and a little envelope. So if you want to form groups kind of around one of those pieces of paper, yeah, I think 4 to 5 people per piece of paper should work. Thank you. Do you have an extra one? Yeah. Thank you. So since we have an extra one, maybe we could do 3 and 3. Does that work? Yeah. Do you want to do maybe 3 and 3? Or 5? We could do 5. Yeah, that works. Yeah, sure. Perfect. So apparently it wasn't showing up in the chat box.
Oh. Okay.
But I think that should work. Well, this is not, I should be sharing the sort.
So were they asking for it to come in the Zoom chat? I didn't think they had access to it.
There's 4 now.
Yeah.
And then the chat, I have
It was supposed to be in.
For those who are online, please let us know if you have any issues. We saw a few questions in the Q&A, put the link in there. On the Wova app, it's also posted in the chat portion. So hopefully that's where you can find it, but please let us know if you have trouble opening the sort link.
All right. It looks like, at least in person, most groups have finished up. So I'm going to stop you there. And thank you all for participating in this activity. For those of you who are at home, we are unfortunately in a room with chairs. Some rooms had tables. We did not get that lucky. So the people at home were doing, or not necessarily at home, but on Zoom, we're doing a Google slide version of the same sort that you just did, not having to balance it on their laps unless they were balancing their laptops on their laps. So here, let's put it in there. I just wanted to show you what they were doing, which was basically the same thing as you. So I don't know if you've made sorts in Google Slides. It's very, very easy. I would suggest in the background when you create it, do it in, what's the word for the, it's not template, it's under edit, I think. No, under view. Wait, yeah. No, theme builder, under theme builder. Sorry. I knew Google had a weird word for it. Anyway, theme builder. Under theme builder, if you make your background in theme builder, then the participants can't manipulate the background. So they won't accidentally like resize the columns or move them out of the way. And it's just in all of the slides as a background thing, they can't change. So yeah, you can do that in theme builder. And then these are just text boxes. So it's nice because they can resize them if you want them a little bigger to see them and drag them around to the right places. So for this sort, I also put in another slide where they're color coded. So that way you can kind of drag them to where they're supposed to be and you'll catch on that these kind of match the colors and it makes it a little easier. I know none of you needed the support for this activity. However, when we're thinking about our learners, it's a nice way to build in another scaffold for them to do it both ways. And so with that scaffolded support, you can either use that to check your work, check your answers, or if that's an extra level of support that you needed, you know you've gotten them in the right areas, and then you can kind of look through and see what the category is and the words are. So sorts are an easy one to do virtually and keep them interactive. I will say if you use Google Slides, prompting in the link, you can change the very end of the link. There's a little word in there that usually says edit, change it to copy, and then whoever uses it has to download a copy so they're not all working on the same slide deck. Unless you want them to be, then you can create separate links and have them do them in groups. All right, so, oh, sorry. Yeah, so those were the answers in case you wanted to check your work. Little sort on the VIP. I did also want to say, obviously VIP is not the only framework for scaffolding. There are a lot of, sorry, we go. There are a lot of different frameworks that look at cognitive demand and changing the way activities are structured. This is just one that kind of looks globally at a lesson, so we can be a little bit more intentional about how we're providing support and making sure we're keeping our students in that ZPD effectively. So it combines well with some other frameworks you might be familiar with, and certainly they are also valuable. So, all right, so moving on to our next little piece here, I'm gonna turn it over to Matilda to talk about independence.
Thank you. So we've talked about different types of scaffold and why you should use them, and now we'll look at how we can help learners build independence. The most important part of scaffolding is to remember that it should be temporary. As your students acquire more language, they will need less scaffolding. Appropriate scaffolding should mean that the task is a little bit uncomfortable and that student needs to stretch a bit to accomplish the task. If scaffolds are making the tasks comfortable and easy, it's probably time to remove some of them. This might mean removing a word bank from a graphic organizer or paragraph frame, or providing a skeletal outline for a writing task rather than a partially completed outline. Adult learners are very good at monitoring their progress. Give them the autonomy to choose their level of support, if that's possible. You could offer different levels of support on a graphic organizer and allow the students to choose which one they use. The gradual release of responsibility was first developed by Fisher and Frey in 2008, and it's a great example of how to build learner independence. This modified version has 4 steps. The time between each step will depend on your learners and the content. The first one is I do, you watch. So you're demonstrating while explaining each step. At the end of the demonstration, you can answer questions, and if appropriate, you can have students repeat the steps that they observed. The next one is we do together. So now students perform each step along with you. You can answer questions and provide clarifications as needed. The third step is you do together and I help. This can be done in pairs or small groups if appropriate. That way students can support each other as they practice. You can move around and observe the students, providing feedback or clarification as needed. Finally, the last steps is you do independently, I watch. At this point, the student have a lot of practice and they should be able to complete the task on their own. This could be an independent or group work, and it could also be an assessment. As the teacher, your role shifts from demonstrating to guiding to monitoring and to observing with support as needed. And now we'll look at an activity.
Okay, we wanted to show you one of the activities we are building into our course. The course will be asynchronous. So wanting to follow kind of the gradual release model, but still wanting the course to be self-paced and asynchronous. We were looking for ways that we could build in interactivity and allow some guided practice before moving into more independent practice. So we have this differentiating a graphic organizer, choose your own adventure. So I'm gonna just demonstrate it, but there's a couple of choices in there. So we'll be monitoring the chat as well as the room. If you wanna shout out which choice you'd like us to take, whether or not you think it's the right choice or the wrong choice, it's kind of fun sometimes to see the wrong answer too. So we'll go ahead and get started. Whoops, let me pull that back real quick. Okay, so this is the instruction page. So if you were at home doing this on your own, there are student profiles. There's 4 of them on the next 4 slides. You're gonna choose a student by clicking on their name banner. The animations automatically come through, and then you're going to be prompted to choose a modification for that student by clicking the button on the slide. Oh yeah. Yeah, this one we're just going to demonstrate and not share the link for this one. We also do have a link to the ESL proficiency standards because all of the scaffolding is aligned to that. So our first learner is Miguel, Beginning ESL Literacy Level 1. You can kind of take a moment to read his background and learning goals and his abilities. Our second learner is Imad. She is a low intermediate, level 4. Okay, our next learner is Gabriella. She is Advanced ESL level 6. And our fourth learner is Jin. He's a high beginning ESL level 3. Who do we want to choose to start with? All right. We'll go back to Miguel. Come on. All right. All right. So here's our basic graphic organizer we're going to start with. And then we're going to choose a modification for our level 1 learner. Do we want to start by adding a word bank with images or adding a section for questions? Right, let's choose our word bank. All right, nice job. So we're going to imagine that Miguel is practicing writing an email to his child's teacher to schedule a meeting. This is what they're working toward. So I don't know, this is kind of in the way here. So we have some simple words in the word bank, high frequency words with images that are more like icons that we can use. All right, what should we do next? We could include a small glossary and add some brief instructions, or we could reduce the complexity and add sentence frames. I'm hearing sentence frames even from the chat too. Okay, let's do that. All right, great idea. Okay. So to reduce the language load, let's remove that evidence and examples section from this one, and we'll reduce our details to 2. We're going to use the icons from the word bank to support our sentence frames. So for the topic or title, we have our 2 icons and with, and then the blanks underneath. So you can kind of look up at the word bank and see that that corresponds with meeting, meeting with, and then teacher. Same with the main idea. Now we've taken the those mortar words, I like to call them, things like articles and prepositions that kind of glue our sentences together. We've taken those out and put our icons in, and we have those available in the sentence frame. And then the 2 details are now just going to be supplying 1 word. So we're good here. We're going to stop here for Miguel, but are there other adaptations you might make for a level 1 learner with a graphic organizer like this? Probably, depending on what you're using it for, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you can use, absolutely can use copyright-free actual images. I would say anytime you're using icons, it's really important to teach your students what they mean in your classroom, but you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I even things that we take for granted are interpreted by things like this, like running or pop bubbles. Anyway, yeah. So this is awesome, but yeah, really good. Yeah, good point. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, mhm. Um, I mean, if you're trying to just create this type of graphic organizer, I think you have to build up your, well, if you have images, you have to build up your, yeah, your bank of images that you use in your toolkit, and then you have them and you can kind of continue using them over and over. It does take time. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. It absolutely does. We all know that differentiation takes a lot of time. But it can be done, and there are ways to try and do it so that it's you're getting maximum effect from your effort that you're putting in. So, all right. Oh, sure. Sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. Um, oops. Yes, and the comment I will say for the people who are online, the comment before that you missed was that icons can often be misleading or confusing, particularly for English learners. And so using actual images might be better than using icons that can be misinterpreted. Is there another student we want to try next? The second one? Okay. All right. So this is our level 4 learner. I feel like my head is just constantly going to be in the way. So for our level 4 learner, and again, it's helpful if you have your, your matrix of where they're at and what they can do handy. But for this learner, would you like to add implications or provide a word bank of transition words? Implications, I hear both, so we'll try implications. All right, let me move this out of the way. All right, so explaining implications requires more complex linguistic structures that are not at level 4. Adding an implication section actually raises this one up to a level 6, that advanced ESL range. So for this one, it's not a great scaffold for a level 4 learner. So we'll go back and we'll try providing a bank of transition words. Move my head out of the way. That's no good. There's no good place. There we go. So we don't have time to read that, but as a level 4 learner, Imad is working towards writing, supporting a claim. So these transition words are organized by language function, sequence or list, example, cause and effect, which you could change depending on the purpose of the writing. So they're relevant to the task of supporting a claim for her. And so what might we do next? We could modify to better fit our task, or we could add images and L1 glosses. Glosses are like definitions of a word. Sorry. Okay. And then also Okay. Sure. We'll actually see it in our level 6 for level 6 learner. Maybe we'll do her next. All right, so we'll modify to fit the task. Let's see what that looks like. So the task is making a claim, providing supporting details, and having a conclusion for our topic, which is public transportation in cities. That was on the previous slide, but my animation popped up and I don't know if you got to see it. Again, the animations are timed so you don't just click through. So yeah, let me move this guy. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. Let's see if I can move this one out of the way for just a second. Oops, not that. So we can see it. There we go. Anyway, so we're going to make a claim, provide supporting details, have a conclusion. Our topic is public transportation in cities. So we've added the word claim to the main idea section and allowed more space, a little bit more space. If you were printing this out, you probably want even more space to write a sentence. We've added supporting to the details and tried to make the space bigger by removing that need for evidence. She doesn't need to do that at level 4. And we've added a space for a conclusion. So it's a little bit better aligned to our level 4 standards. Of course, especially as we're getting into more complex writing, this is not the only thing we would be giving our students. This is kind of isolated. We want to make sure that our task instructions are clear and aligned, that a rubric we're using is clear also and aligned, and that the way we're teaching toward this task is also aligned to the ultimate goal and to our rubric. All right. So I heard some requests for our level 6. So I'm going to go through. Here we go. Okay, so for our level 6 learner, we again have our same basic graphic organizer. Do we want to add prompts that require analysis or evaluation, or add some simple sentence starters? All right, we're going to make it more complex for her, right? Let's do it. Okay. Yeah, y'all can't see it either. Thank you. It's always something, right? All right, so now we might give the students a choice of prompts here. So we have these 2 prompts. Should professional certifications in fields like healthcare, engineering be standardized internationally? Or should AI play a greater role in decision-making in critical industries? These prompts are relevant to Gabriella's background and likely her classmates. Of course, you would want to make the prompts as relevant for your students as possible. They also require higher order thinking skills like analysis and evaluation. So what would we do next? We want to simplify the graphic organizer by removing the detail section, or add space for counterclaims and modify some other sections. All right. Let's do that. All right, let's modify. So she's working towards constructing substantive claims distinguished from counterclaims, providing supporting evidence for claims, and refuting counterclaims. So we're going to add a counterclaim. We have our main claim and our main counterclaim. We're going to add evidence to support the claim, and then also some refutations for the counterclaim and evidence for those, as well as a conclusion. Once we're getting into adding all of these things, obviously when we give it to our students, we want to make it, if they're typing, spaces that they can actually fit, you know, their language into, or if we're doing it as a printout that they're handwriting in, that we've allowed for enough space, because the language is much more complex and they're going to be using a lot more of it. So not only are there a lot more sections to organize the writing, we need to also be able to make them bigger. Great. So these now better align for those skills for our level 6 learner. Probably will stop that here. I think we've kind of seen the gist of it, and I think we're close to time, right? Yeah, we are. Whoops. We are at time. My apologies. All right. So in a quick conclusion, here are some references. And we thank you so much for coming to our presentation today. Really appreciate it. We also have this in our handouts that are linked to the presentation. You can take our survey. We're just gathering more information from teachers to find out what topics you're interested in and things like that. So yeah, so thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.